Here we are for our third video in the Mont Vernon Town and Town Hall History series. So far, we've talked about the first settlers who came to this land when it was the frontier back in the 1740s. It took another 20 years before there were enough families living here to form a town, which they named Amherst. As the American colonists became frustrated with the English monarchy, so the hilltop farmers became frustrated with the Amherst villagers. But rather than go to war, the hilltop farmers formed their own parish, building their very own meeting house with the materials they had around them. The building was a concrete start in the quest for independence from their parent town of Amherst, but they were still grudgingly a part of Amherst. Despite repeated petitions to become a town of their own, all of their requests were denied. Meanwhile, the southwest portion of Amherst was looking to break away. In 1783, the people there raised funds to build a meeting house of their own, based on Mont Vernon's meeting house design. And so the third parish of Amherst came to be. Then in 1794, only 11 years after, they got their charter and put the town of Milford on the map. Now, I've been trying to figure out how they were able to achieve this, while the Northwest parishioners could not. I'm sure it had something to do with how large their population had grown, and I suspect that the economy of the new town played a part as well. Milford is located on both sides of the Souhegan River, which made some very fine farmland on the floodplains. And it also had water-powered mills. The second parish of Amherst had no such blessings. Hilltop farming was rockier and quicker to suffer during dry times. I haven't found exact details on when our mills were created, but they were only ever powered by streams and brooks that must have had a shorter milling season compared to a river like the Souhegan. The citizens on the hill used water power where they could, but there was not much hope for anything grander than a saw or grist mill. In short, the economy was limited. Any population here at the time was probably not very wealthy. However, things began to look up at the turn of the century. As the 1700s gave way to the 1800s, plans for a turnpike would completely change the future. Three men formed a corporation called
the Proprietors of the Second New Hampshire Turnpike,
and commenced to build a very straight road that would become an important link, allowing consistent transportation between Boston, Vermont, and Canada. If we think about traveling in 1799, we must picture roads that were not much more than pathways through woods or cleared fields. They would have been created and maintained by the farmers living nearby. Washouts and downed trees would have been regular problems and may not have been fixed that quickly if the local farmer was busy. Roads were not marked or even named. Going a long distance would have been much trickier without someone who was familiar with the route to act as a guide. The turnpike would have been an amazing travel improvement for anyone living near it. And it bisected the Northwest Parish, cutting a diagonal line from the southeast corner to the northwest corner. Once it was built, travelers were charged for every mile used. A 2-horse stagecoach began to run a weekly trip from Amherst to Windsor, Vermont. Farmers drove herds of cattle and sheep and other livestock down to Boston to sell. All who used the turnpike needed a refreshment along the way and a place to sleep for themselves and their animals. Some of the hilltop farmers went into the tavern business. Manufacturing became possible. parts were brought up from Lowell and Boston and assembled right here into clocks, fancy boxes, and writing desks. These products in turn were sold around town or transported to other markets. When the turnpike was finished in 1801, it quickly proved to be a huge boon to the hardscrabble farmers in Amherst, Northwest Parish. In 1803, they were finally granted their own town charter. Finally, it's about time! Yay! Woohoo! This meant that our 20-year-old meeting house now officially served as the spiritual and administrative center for our town.